strategist Joel Rubin, who is here with me. Joel, thanks so much for joining us. We got a bit of a peek behind the curtain with a hot mic moment when President Joe Biden was speaking after the State of the Union about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's take a listen to that.
I told him, Bibi, show me pieces. I said, Bibi, you know I can't come to Jesus. Sir, just... That mic looked good. That was good.
So, Joel, there, the president talking about needing a come-to-Jesus moment with Netanyahu. He's now talking about red lines. He didn't detail them, but what does that tell you about how he's feeling about the Israeli leadership and Prime Minister Netanyahu right now?
Yeah, Alex, look, clearly the president is incredibly frustrated. He has been consistently behind the scenes telling Prime Minister Netanyahu that he wants Israel to have a credible plan for the day after and to take care of civilian life. And it's obvious that the president doesn't see that happening. And so I think what he's getting at now, and he's been pushing it publicly, I got to tell you, Alex, I've never seen before an American president be so publicly tough on Israel in a venue like the State of the Union. That was unique. And he's making it clear that he has been supportive of Israeli security, as he should be, but that Prime Minister Netanyahu has to be responsive, and he doesn't feel like the prime minister has been enough.
But we have seen former presidents, Republican presidents, including President Reagan, be critical of Israel and scale back American support for Israel. So we're hearing this increased pressure. But how do you expect the president to ramp that up and to deal with what we saw tonight, which is this dissatisfaction among the political base over his support for Israel?
Yeah, no, it's an incredibly difficult balancing act. And what the president is doing is laying out a vision for how to get to an endpoint. And that endpoint, in his mind, is a two-state solution. But to get there means a temporary ceasefire. It means integrating a Palestinian leadership into running Gaza, bringing in the international community, having the deal where the hostages are released for increased humanitarian assistance to the Gazan people. All of that wrapped together. That's the vision. That's what he's trying to get across to the Israeli leadership and the Israeli people who, by the way, deeply disapprove of Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership. He's at 15% polling. He knows it. The number two, essentially, in his government, Benny Gantz, a member of his war cabinet, was here in Washington. It very much upset Prime Minister Netanyahu, and it should have, because there are alternatives to him. And I think the president and his team are very smart in laying out a vision that provides for long-term peace and security while still supporting Israel overall as a key ally.
But where Netanyahu and the majority of Israelis are on the same page is aid for Gaza.
Yes.
And the reluctance to send more aid into Gaza, which Israelis accuse Hamas of stealing a lot of. So Israel has been reluctant to open up more border crossings to allow that aid in, which the U.S. has been calling for. What do you make of the U.S. now being forced to airdrop aid and build this pier, which could take months and 1,000 U.S. troops? What does that say about the lack of sway, essentially, that the U.S. has currently with Israel?
Well, I think it says what we saw from the president right there on the floor of the House, which is he is frustrated. He's not getting through to Prime Minister Netanyahu what he believes needs to be done regarding aid to the Palestinians. And there is a deep concern as well that this starving of the Palestinians is in some way being used as leverage to pressure Hamas to release the hostages, to come for a deal. That's not the way this should be conducted. The president, unfortunately, from a humanitarian perspective, doesn't have a lot of cards to play, so he's putting our forces and our assets straight into the field. And I have to say, to add to this, this needs to be embarrassing for the Israeli Defense Forces. To have the American military have to go into a country, to a territory that Israel controls and provide aid to those civilians that Israel itself should be supporting and feeding, that's a real sign of discomfort and, frankly, disappointment in the Israeli Defense Forces.
You would think the U.S. might have more cards to play, given the extraordinary level of military aid that the U.S. has sent to Israel over the years. But President Biden warned in the past few days that if there were not a ceasefire deal in place by Ramadan, things could be very, very dangerous. Ramadan is believed to start tomorrow night. And it doesn't look like that deal is going to be in place. What do you think could happen during this holy month?
Well, a couple things to look out for. First is provocateur Itamar Ben-Gvir in the Israeli cabinet calling for preventing Palestinians, for example, from going to the Haram al-Sharif, to the religious site, the Temple Mount. That needs to be stopped. But I do think negotiations are going to continue. There's no expiration date for these negotiations. The hostages need to be released. Hamas needs to agree to their release. So that's going to continue. But will Hamas potentially try to set on fire the West Bank? And will Ben-Gvir try to create the dynamics on the Temple Mount that could lead to more violence? Could that undermine such negotiations? That's really what we have to watch out for.
It's certainly a calculation that many think Hamas is making, that it's actually in their benefit to inflame things further, draw more in the West Bank and beyond.
That's the tinderbox we're living in right now.
Joel Rubin, thank you so much for your thoughts tonight. Appreciate it.